What's going on, everybody? It's ETAPRIME back here again. Today we're going to be taking a look at the all-new Onexplayer X1 Ryzen edition. A couple months back, One X did release the X1, but with the original version, you could only pick it up in an Intel flavor, be it the 135H or the 155H Ultra CPU, and not a lot of people were keen on that. Now, we've got a Ryzen version, and this thing is an amazing performer. If you're not familiar with these 3-in-1s, basically what we've got here is the 10.95-inch display. You can buy a detachable keyboard, but it does come with detachable controllers. So it's basically a handheld, tablet, and a laptop all in one. I've been testing this one out for the last couple days, and yeah, we've definitely got a much better performer here. They are touting this as a 3-in-1, but what makes this, in my opinion, a handheld gaming console are the detachable controllers. So here we have both of them, left and right side. They are using Hall-based analog sticks. We've got a new D-pad design. It is using micro switches, but we've got a swappable top here. So we can go from dish to a regular D-pad, and I was able to test this out on the X1 Mini, which I recently reviewed. They've actually done a pretty decent job, even though we've got micro switches. With the regular D-pad installed on it, it works really well for fighting games. We've got linear triggers around back, and one thing I haven't been able to take a look at yet with these X1 handhelds is the detachable controller adapter. So basically what this is going to do is allow us to turn the detachable controllers into a detached controller. It does work wirelessly, so when we're in tablet mode or laptop mode, we can use this controller with the X1, not a problem at all. In fact, we can actually connect this to basically any device. And of course, they did have to add a little bit of RGB here around those analog sticks. But one thing I really like about this setup is right in the middle, there's a little cutout with a window. You can see the circuit board through there, and they've got a small white LED which lights up. I think it looks pretty cool. And overall, in detached mode, this controller does feel quite nice. It really wouldn't be a 3-in-1 without some accessories, and the X1 does come with this back panel. It magnetically attaches, and it acts as our stand, so we can actually fold this out. It goes right on the back. It's got the cutouts for the LEDs and the cooling system. It slaps right on here, attaches really nicely. It does add a little bit of weight to the unit, but we've got that fold-out stand there. And of course, we've got a detachable keyboard. Now this attaches using the pogo pins up top on this thing. It's got a nice trackpad, and it is backlit, so it's a single zone white LED backlit keyboard. But yeah, on the go, this does come in really handy for getting work done. And it also acts as kind of a folio case, so we can just magnetically attach it right here. Keyboard's on, ready to go to use with Windows. Trackpad is working. And when you're ready to go, you can actually just fold this up. We'll close the stand round back, and we've got a nice little protective case for the X1. Before we move over to the detachable controllers, I do want to mention that the X1 does come with these controller port covers. So they just kind of slide right in where the controllers would go just to protect those pogo pins. But yeah, let's go ahead and turn this thing into a handheld, and it's super easy to do. I've got those covers removed, and all we need to do is slot the controllers right in the side. Uses pogo pins on the controller, pogo pads on the handheld itself to make connection. And obviously, with it set up like this, we've got a pretty big handheld. That screen is coming in at almost 11 inches, but Onexplayer did release the X1 Mini recently with an 8.8-inch 144Hz display. I just wanted to give you a little comparison between the full-size X1, and yeah, it's definitely coming in much larger. And the controllers are the same, so they are interchangeable between the two, but just kind of in tablet mode here, you can see the size difference. The 10.95-inch on the full-size X1 kind of dwarfs that 8.8. And when it comes to the Steam Deck OLED, again, we've just got a much larger handheld or much larger 3-in-1 here. When it comes to I/O, One X has added quite a bit to the X1. Over here on the right-hand side, we've got a full-size USB 3.2 port and a micro SD card reader. Over on the left-hand side, we've got dual USB 4, and these do run at a 40 gig protocol, so plugging in an eGPU, super simple. And up top from the left to the right, we've got our turbo button. This is going to allow us to up the TDP on the fly. Plus, it'll open up the One X console software. We'll take a closer look at that in a second. Moving on down, we've got a little port here that will open up in just a bit. Our volume rocker is also up top here, along with our power button/fingerprint sensor. But One X has also added an OCuLink port to this unit and the 3.5mm audio jack. So if you did want to connect a USB 4 or Thunderbolt 4 eGPU, you can do it, but we've got OCuLink on this unit, which is going to make for a more stable and faster connection with an eGPU like their One X GPU. Another thing I wanted to mention here is inside of the box, we do get a 100-watt PD fast charger. We can charge this up pretty quickly. Now, it's not the biggest battery in the handheld world, but having that 100-watt charger really helps. When it comes to the overall specs of the new X1, for that APU, we've got the AMD Ryzen 7 8840U, 8 cores, 16 threads, a base clock of 3.3 GHz, and a boost up to 5.1. With this, we get those Radeon 780M graphics based on RDNA 3, and these will clock up to 2700 MHz. You can pick the X1 up with up to 64 GB of LPDDR5X at 7500 MHz. It utilizes a 2280 Gen 4 M.2 SSD. The built-in speakers are tuned by Harman, and one thing that One X has been doing really well recently is their speaker system. This thing gets really loud. It's got some deep tones to it, and it's not really tinny. I mean, they've done a great job with their speakers on their recent handhelds for sure. The screen is a 10.95-inch, 120Hz IPS at 2560 by 1600. So hitting that turbo button up top one time is going to bring up our overlay here. This is what they're calling their game center, and we can easily adjust a lot of different parameters here directly from this software. It comes pre-installed, and at the top we've got our performance. We can go all the way down to 4 watts on this 8840U, up to 30 watts, and with this we do have a little bit of a boost. So at 30 watts you may see it jump up to 35 every once in a while. But for the most part, down here in between at 15, this is just going to be strictly 15 watts across the board. Moving down, we've got our fan mode. Fully adjustable, 2 different presets here, and we can get right in here and adjust the curve directly from here. Resolution, we can change the RGB effect on the controllers. Performance overlay, and this does rely on Rivatuner and hardware info, so you will need to download those applications. I personally don't use this, I just use Afterburner and Rivatuner, but it's here if you want to test it out. We can enable or disable turbo mode on our CPU, and the 8840U already boosts up to 3.3 GHz. A lot of games, newer games even, won't need to really go over that. You can leave this on if you want to, and one that I know benefits from having it on is something like Cyberpunk 2077. Older games, indie games, you could leave this off. That way, that CPU doesn't need to pull as much power boosting up to those higher clocks. So it can definitely save on battery life. We've got a built-in gyro, and this can be adjusted in several different ways. You can set this up in mouse mode, Xbox gamepad mode, DS4 or DualShock 4 gamepad mode. We can turn it on from here, auto startup, again, mouse, Xbox or DS4. And from here, we can set up a hotkey to turn it on and turn it off. So if you want to leave this on, you can always enable it or disable it when you're playing a game by setting up a specific hotkey here. But the gyro in these systems does work fairly well. Sound vibration and game trainer is something new. Now, I personally haven't messed with this, but I've given it a read through. Basically, this is going to look for game trainers for certain games, and I'm not a huge fan of trainers due to all of the fake ones out there on the market. I'm not exactly sure where this fetches from or anything like that, so I haven't used it yet. We can adjust the screen brightness, we can adjust the volume, and we can go right into our game center or our game launcher. Another way to get in here is hold that turbo button for 3 seconds. It'll bring us directly into here. Now, first startup, you will need to scan your directories. So I just hit Y here, scan all my directories. And this is going to look for your Epic games, your Steam games, your Xbox games. It'll automatically import everything here, download some box art and metadata. So for Hades 2, we head in here, gives us a little information about the game. Got a nice little background there, and it just makes it really easy to go through and launch your favorite games directly from a nice little game launcher. You can also favorite games. Play often, so it'll automatically populate the games you play here. And moving up to the top here, everything on here is customizable. Set up useful keys, primary mode, secondary mode. You can set up a hotkey to allow you to use buttons in different orientations if you need to. And we can do this by setting up our expand keys on the backside of the controller. So if we wanted to, we could actually set A up to work as B or any other button when we hold the other expand button on the back. I personally don't have many use case scenarios where I would use this, but I'm sure there are some games and things like that people could come up with different ways to use this feature. We can also do it with the D-pad. Shoulder and triggers are also fully adjustable. These are linear, and we can set the dead zones up for the inner and outer. Analog sticks can be fully adjusted, and we've also got a macro that we can program. So if you want to set up a specific hotkey to, let's say, pull off a special move in Street Fighter, you could do it from here, and it's just kind of a one-key combo. And finally, under Others, we've got our Update Center. This will allow us to update the controller driver, BIOS, and other firmware once it's available. And we've also got a resource download. So from here, this will just kind of populate different game launchers that we can go through and download. If you want to search online for this, you can. Or if we wanted to download Epic Games, we could go directly here. It's going to open up a browser for us, and we can download it directly from the website. Just kind of an easy link there inside of the Game Center. Starting off really light here with one of my favorite newer games. We've got Hades 2. I'm at 10 watts and we are at 2560 by 1600. I've got VSync enabled, and at 10 watts we're almost able to get up to that 120 FPS there. But remember, we are at 2560 by 1600, so I'm actually going to take it down to 1200p. And now at 1200p high settings with Hades 2, we can run this at a constant 120, and our APU isn't pulling as much wattage. I've got it set at 10 watts, but we're only pulling up to around 7.6 watts. The next thing I wanted to show off here was FreeSync and how well it works. Now, I was actually pretty impressed here. We're going to go into the settings. I actually wasn't expecting to get this kind of frame rate right now. We are at low settings, but I'm at 2560 by 1600. I've also got the built-in scaler for this game, known as IGTI, set to performance. I was kind of expecting to be at around 40 FPS with this. We're up in the 60s, but it's not a constant 60. You'll see a dip under. Either way, with FreeSync, it still feels super smooth here, and we're not going to get any kind of screen tearing. And that's one reason I always mention that, all of these handhelds need a VRR or a FreeSync display. In my opinion, it just makes everything a lot smoother because we're not seeing any kind of frame tearing, even if we're going under that 60 marker, whatever we have the display locked at. I know not everybody out there is going to be playing at the maximum resolution of this display, so I've just dropped it down to 1200p, and we're seeing an average of around 74 FPS. Once we get up into the buildings, not a lot of city traffic going on, it goes up into the 90s. Next, we've got Helldivers 2, 1200p with a low-medium mix. FSR is set to balanced, but I've taken the TDP up to 24 watts. This is how I like to play it on these APUs, and we're seeing some great performance. And if you wanted to increase battery life, you could drop this down to a 15-watt TDP, 900p, and see about the same kind of performance here, seeing averages of around 83 FPS. And finally, in handheld mode here, I figured I'd boot up some Overwatch 2. So I'm at the medium preset. I didn't change anything else except for turn VSync off. 18 watt TDP, 1920 by 1200. And with a little tweaking, we could definitely run this at a constant 120. We're up over 120 here in some cases, but once we get into a firefight, you'll see it dip on down. Never went under 110 FPS with this game, and I know it's really well optimized. It's been out for a while, but it's still pretty impressive seeing a handheld run it so well. Checking out some gaming in tablet mode here. I mean, I've still got the controllers attached, but this is Modern Warfare 3, 1200p. Balanced preset, FSR is set to balanced. We got an average of 112 FPS. I also ran the built-in benchmark for Red Dead 2, 900p low with FSR set to balanced, 28 watt TDP, and you'll see it jump up to around 31 every once in a while. That's that boost they have added in there. Again, at those lower TDPs, like 15 watts, it's just going to be 15 watts. They don't boost any from there. But we got an average of 76 FPS with this one. Pretty low of 16, which is kind of normal for these iGPUs with the load in. Overall, not too bad. But the final one I tested here was a game that's given me issues on these iGPUs. So there's a little trick that I use here. This is Horizon Forbidden West, where at 900p low, FSR is set to balance, 28 watt TDP. Frame gen or fluid motion frames is off right now. We're seeing averages in the high 30s, but there's a way to fix this by enabling fluid motion frames. So from the software here, we can just go ahead and tack it on. VSync has to be off. It does need to be in exclusive full screen mode. But now, if you take a look at that frame counter, we've almost doubled the FPS we were just running at. And usually I run this at 720 with FSR set to performance to get even more out of it. But at 900 with FSR set to balanced, paired up with this FreeSync display, it's not that bad. I'm not getting any kind of frame tearing or anything like that. It does look great, and I wouldn't mind playing it like this. we're seeing an average of around 56 FPS now. The last thing I wanted to take a look at here was estimated battery life. While I haven't done any real-world testing, it's actually pretty easy to see exactly what this thing's drawing from the battery in total, meaning the controllers, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. We've got a game running here. It's Spider-Man Remastered at 1600p maxed out. Screen brightness is at 50%. We know the size of the battery, and taking the TDP up, we can see this change. I'm using hardware info, and we've got the total battery draw. So at that 10 watts, it's pulling around 20 watts from the battery with the way I've got everything set up. At 15 watts, around 29, and so on and so on. We're going to go up from there. So we've got a 65.02 watt-hour battery, screen brightness was at 50%, controller RGB was on, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth was on, and the fan was set to auto. At a 10 watt TDP, our total battery draw was around 21 watts, giving us around 3 hours and 5 minutes of runtime. At a 15 watt TDP, jumps up to 29 watts, 2 hours and 14 minutes. Running this thing at a 20 watt TDP, our total battery draw was 35 watts, around 1 hour and 51 minutes. And finally, 30 watt TDP. We're maxed out here, and this thing can definitely pull some power. 51 watts being drawn from that battery. We're looking at around 1 hour and 16 minutes. And keep in mind, for indie games, we're not even going to draw up to 10 watts. As we saw with Hades 2, it was 7.5 at 1200p. So we can definitely extend this battery life by quite a bit. In the time that I've spent with the new Onexplayer X1 Ryzen edition, I've had a pretty good time. Now, of course, it's a larger handheld. It's much heavier than most of the other ones on the market. And if you're not into this, I completely understand. But in the end, it's actually meant to be a 3-in-1. We've got handheld mode, laptop mode, and tablet mode. I will be spending more time with the X1, and another video I'm really interested in making is checking out that OCuLink performance with the 1X GPU, so if you want to see a video like that, let me know in the comments below. But that's going to wrap it up for my first look video. If you're interested in learning a little more, maybe even backing the Indiegogo for the X1 or the X1 Mini, I'll leave some links in the description. And like always, thanks for watching.